The main thing to our customers and clients wasn't necessarily the main thing that I felt our business was, our, the company that I work for was actually pitching, right? And you go through it for a while and you're just like, I'm miserable. I'd rather go try it on my own. And, naivety and not knowing what you don't know, you just go out and you just start doing and you try to figure it out along the way. And then you look back a few years later and you're like, gosh, I've built something that's great and a platform to do more and I'm having fun again. But, there's a lot of dark times in that process too.
Market Like a Rockstar, episode 12. You are here. Thank you so much for checking out this podcast. My name is RPI. I'll be your host. Took about a year off. It took a year exactly to the day off. My wife and I had our first baby in March of 2024. And yeah, things got a little crazy there for a minute. So, the good news is we've kept the child alive for a year and things are going well. And I'm super excited to be back with the 12th episode of the Market Like a Rockstar podcast. And I'm excited to get back into the habit of doing these regularly. Today, I'm sitting down with John Lovell. John is the owner of the Lovell Insurance Group here in Kansas City. We've been friends since college. We dive deep on going out on your own, running and growing a small business, and more. Let's get started. John, why don't you introduce yourself and let people know kind of your backstory, what you do for a living, and if you would get into how we know each other too, that'd be great.
Well, you were my first college roommate, so that's where it all started. 1993, True. Sigma Alpha Epsilon House. Mm-hmm. And the rest is history, right? So here we are today, 20-something years later. So we went to Mizzou, graduated college, 98? I was on the 5-year program. And my professional career has been anything but typical. And fast forward to 2017 through a bunch of different jobs, careers, whatever you want to call it. I ended up launching my own insurance brokerage. So in 2017, decided to kind of plant my own flag after working for an agency for a couple of years here in Lee Summit. So that's where our office is. It's where I live. It's where I grew up. Also, about 3 years ago, ran for city council. So I'm actually an elected official for the city of Lee Summit. And anybody that knows my past knows that's a miracle that I could actually do that.
That is a miracle.
They don't turn over as many stones for local politics, as I would say. My friends say this is about as far as I should go.
I think so. I think that their lack of opposition research is pretty stunning. Yeah, whoever you're running against. Yeah.
Well, it's cool too. You and I reconnected. You had just finished your kind of music career, getting back integrated into the business world. That was really the onset of kind of a new way of marketing and business development with the advent of video, social media, LinkedIn. And if anything, I would say that's defines you and I is we've never really done things the normal way. And so, it's been cool to watch your growth and your business grow as well as mine. And it's been an interesting journey, that's for sure.
Yeah. And I do feel like it was wild because we've gotten on parallel paths, you know what I mean? Because obviously I did the music thing for a while, but we both really went out on our own at almost the exact same time. Yeah. So I started in October of 17 and I remember talking to you when you were, it was probably within months, right? Because I know you were in 17 too, right? When you started Lovell. Yeah. So that was really interesting. And the reason that I wanted to get you on today is because I was scrolling through LinkedIn and John does really well on LinkedIn. He's one of the person, he was an early adopter to it. You know what I mean? And I used you as an example when I talk to my clients because, it's not just about posting it's not just about posting the hacky, I don't even what
humbled the hacky and honored to receive this recognition.
Yes. It's not just about that. You're very good at the social side of it, which is, you make thoughtful comments on other people's posts. Just from a marketing standpoint, it's smart. And it's also, it's fun to do because it allows you to kind of, truly be social as opposed to just going on and trying to sell shit to people,
Yeah, I think it's, you're just trying to be authentic. And I think in today's day and age, it's very easy, especially on LinkedIn. I think, it's very easy to just kind of put up this facade of all the great things going on in your business. And we do some of that. I mean, we certainly want to share our victories, and maybe I'm guilty of being an overshare at times. I'm never really afraid to kind of share what I'm going through or how I'm feeling. And that is just, through a lot of life lessons. And the hope is that I just want to make meaningful, real connections and kind of show who I am. I'm not really there to try and sell anything. But I think in our business, it is personal, and anything I can do that may help someone else, or at least share more of my journey and kind of what I've gone through, hopefully it helps others. And I will say, how these things come to me, I don't know. Like, I had coffee, I'd reconnected with a mutual friend of ours, like the week before, and we were just kind of catching up. We hadn't seen each other in a long time. And I remember her mentioning to me that I was unemployable, and we just talked about what that meant. And so as I remember getting into work that day, and I just kind of pulled it up, and I was like, I just started writing.
Yeah.
I just kind of started putting it down. I don't really have a method or madness to it. I just kind of start writing, and then you just hope it resonates with people. And then I just hit send, and I don't really worry about it. It's like, I'm just putting it out there in the universe, and hopefully some people get something from it.
Yeah. Well, and what's so funny about that post in particular was, so I have a client who I've worked with for a long time. I've known for longer. And he is now, he and I started something with just the two of us, in the podcast space, and he's grown and grown and grown. But now he's integrated with a large media company. And along with that came all of the trappings of a large corporation. And it's just one of those things where I haven't been around that in so long. And I only worked in corporate America for like two different stints at like 2.5 years each. So I was in it for like 4 or 5 years, and I've been out of college for almost 30 years, not quite 30 years at this point. Well, maybe.
Oh, we're close, buddy. 3 years away from 30 years.
Yeah. So for a long time, and I've avoided that, but it just reminded, like, when he and I, and we were just going back and forth, there are 13 people on these emails, and they're all like, what do these people do? Like, we don't know. And I'm sitting there, I'm talking to him about it. And it's just like, he's like, these are just a ton of project managers. And for me, and I read your post, and I'm the exact, literally, I could have written the same thing, because when I went back after I played music, 2016, I came back to Kansas City from Nashville, and I got back into radio sales because I had to get something on my resume. And it was just wild to me how the company that I went to work for didn't even have a CRM. They gave us an Excel spreadsheet. And I had come from booking my own, just a one-man, like literally a one-man band, booking myself. I had a CRM. I had stuff in place like this. And I remember talking to my sales manager, like, where's the systems here? Oh, well, they're handwriting orders. This is 2016. Now I can't sit by and take part of in something where, if it can be better, we got to fix it. Like, I just can't, I'm not wired that way. I can't just go with the flow. And one of the craziest things to me was, I came from Nashville, and I moved down there late because I went through a divorce when I was 35. So I moved down to Nashville when I was 35. And the people that I was running with were like 25 for the most part. There were guys that I met. It was a group of Mizzou guys that I had met through bar owners in Columbia. And we when you go to Nashville, it's almost like a pledge class. Like, you kind of group up with the people, and then everybody kind of grows together and stuff. But it was amazing to me because the people in Nashville at that time everybody was just ham and egging it. They were just doing whatever they could, but they were passionate. They were working more hours than, just going 100 miles an hour all the time, and making no money. And then I came back to Kansas City, and I got this job, and everybody, like, this place was is so toxic. And I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but I'm here to tell you, it was it's bananas that anybody could even stay in this organization. And I just remember sitting in there and saying, like, all these people a lot of them were making a really good living, and they were miserable. And I came from a place where people were struggling to pay their rent, but they were like, let's say fulfilled sounds so like cheesy or lame or whatever. But that's what, one thing that Nashville has, and everybody down there, a lot of people go down there to be a musician or whatever, but you always end up hustling. And a lot of times you find your way and you end up maybe taking you pivot and you end up doing something that's adjacent to what you went down there for. You know what I mean? And that's what I think is so interesting, because everybody down there has this spirit where they're going to figure it out. They're in the jungle with a machete, as opposed to taking a safer path, but then just swallowing loads of shit on a daily basis, dude. I don't know. I mean, everybody's wired differently, but when I read your post, it just talked about, you know, that. And I mean, I know because you'd worked in the insurance space before, right?
Yeah, I was actually my first job right out of college, but I was there for like a year.
Yeah.
But it was, you know, it's funny how things come back. But I would say this too, like I remember talking to you about this, and I'm reminded of, I think it was like Jamie Foxx's Oscar speech years ago. And I think he had won for Ray Charles. And, you know, in that role, he had to like play the piano, right? And he was talking, I think it was maybe his grandmother or someone was very influential in his life. But there are things that he just did all through his life, not knowing where they might end up leading and being beneficial, right? And so he wanted to play sports and do all these things. You know, his grandmother's like, well, you're still going to play the piano and you're going to do this music, right? And he's like, you don't know. You're just building and building and building, and you're gaining skills in a way that you don't really truly know how you might use them down the road. And so like for you, all those things you learned trying to build your music brand and you know, just, you know, going to bars, getting people there, the social media, the video, the audio, you didn't have any idea that at some point in your career, all those tools, all those skills that you built up would lead you to where you are today, right? And so you don't know that. And then I would also say, like, you know, that's when it is such a long shot, right, to go to Nashville and try to make it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, and everybody has this, you know, they have these visions of where it's going to be. And like you said, it rarely ends up being what, you know, the end thing never really was the original thing. But when you're in a position where it's for you and that like you don't feel like you're working, right? You're working all the time, but it means more because you believe in what you're doing, and it's not someone else putting these parameters on you to go do it. You're just trying to do everything you can to be successful. And I would say, like, you know, even for me, I've spent 20 years kind of like as an entrepreneur and maybe like had 3 jobs, maybe no longer than like 2 years at each one. And that's where I kind of learned that I was unemployable, because back to your point, like when you join the corporate station or whatever, I don't want to say I'm like contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, but I always kind of look at things like, how do I optimize this, make it more efficient? And by the way, like how I do things is probably going to be a lot different than anyone else.
Yeah.
Hang the goal for me and then kind of let me be messy along the way to get it. And that is great if but I also am empathetic now. I'm more empathetic now to that corporate side, because like, hey, they're an established business that's been around, that has a profit and loss statement, and they kind of have a playbook for what works for them. And they're investing money in me to go be something for them down the road. And so all those reports I was responsible to get, or did you know, and I wonder how accurate any of those are for anybody that's had to do, you know, turn in call lists or anything like that. But, you know, I'm more empathetic to that. It's like, I get it. I was a pain in the butt, you know, like, they're a 100-year-old company that's been around for a long time, and far be it from some guy like me to come in and tell them like, well, I think we should do it this way. It's like, well, what do you know?
Right.
And so it's good because I get to see kind of what's going on inside, but then I felt like I was actually learning like what was really important. Like the main thing to our customers and clients wasn't necessarily the main thing that I felt our business was, or, you know, the company that I work for was actually pitching. Right. And so, you know, and you go through it for a while and you're just like, I'm miserable. I'd rather go try it on my own. And, you know, naivety and not knowing what you don't know, you just go out and you just start doing, and you try to figure it out along the way. And then you look back a few years later and you're like, gosh, I've built something that's great and a platform to do more, and I'm having fun again. But, you know, there's a lot of dark times in that process too.
Yeah. There's a lot of uncertainty. And the craziest thing about it is, you know, and, you know, not to get super into the faith or anything, but when you try to control so much stuff, you know what I mean? You talk about, especially for my personal journey, I hate saying that, but like the reality of it is, when I went to Nashville, I went down there and I'd had a rough start in my personal life. I didn't have any kids at the time, obviously. I'd been married and that ended. But I went down there and I met this group of guys, and I was doing what I wanted to do. Mainly just part of it was just feeling like there was a new freedom for me to go after something. But I became friends with these guys. And now those guys that are 10 years younger than me, a couple of them have record deals, but they're not the guys, you probably don't know who they are, right? Like they've never, like none of them have nailed it. I got close enough when I was in Nashville, speaking about kind of taking a winding path somewhere, I got close enough to see people that had made it and to see like what that really looks like versus what it looks like on the outside. And the other thing is like now, I got a second start at life when I came back to Kansas City. I've got I was just telling you, I've got a baby that turns a year old in a week. And I've got a buddy, like two of my buddies in Nashville. One of them does video stuff, so he's in Nashville. The other one he's got a deal, I think, with Sony. I mean, he's on the road, he's doing the music thing full time. And he's probably in his late 30s now, but he's married. He had a baby within 2 or 3 months of me. And I sit there and I look at like what he's doing, which is he's living the dream. He's got the record deal. He's got the tour bus. He's got all this stuff, but I cannot imagine getting on a bus and leaving that kid at this point in my life. I'm like, having a child, and this as well. I mean, you're like, I'm a really old dad. You're an old dad too, but like it totally changes the way you look at things. And that to me also is one of those things where, it's really hard when people are going a certain direction for so long and then to totally pull back and stop and say, you know what, I've done this for so long and I'm going to go a completely different direction. Now, obviously you were in the same industry and things like that. And the beauty of this, and this is something where like, if the other thing about the people I was working with, they were miserable at this company. And my thing was, they were making a good living, but I was always like, well, if you're not happy, then why don't you go do something else? Because if you're like, and to me, it's like, I can bitch and complain and moan, for a while, but if I don't take action to remedy what I'm bitching and moaning and complaining about, then I just have to look at myself and say, well, what are you doing to change it? If you're unhappy at this place, and the great thing about being in America is if you are in a company, you're like, oh, the CEO sucks, the boss sucks, the owner sucks. All right. Go do it. Like go start your own, if you're a plumber and you think the company you work for sucks, then go start your own plumbing business. Right. There's like, it doesn't matter, especially now. It's easier than ever, number one, to get started. But number two, you can learn how to do anything. You can learn how to form the LLC. Everything is for free on YouTube. Like you can go to YouTube University and figure everything out. You have to have enough self-starter in you to go do it. And then you've got to have enough balls to take the leap, and you've got to be in a position to do it. Like that's the other thing. It's like, you can't, again, for me, it's like, and this is not a revelation to anyone who has kids, but you have kids. And it's like, everything changes. And it's like, you can't just say, well, I'm just going to, quit my job and go chase my dream or
that becomes that becomes a challenging part. I think, because I didn't have kids, I wasn't married. And I've never, what the world kind of told me I was supposed to do, I just never really wanted to do it. Like, it was get out of school, go get that sales position, go crush it. And then, I've had a lot of, deep introspection about what's important to me. I often joke that I'm thankful I wasn't more successful earlier, because I don't know that I make this kind of transition into really understanding myself and through a lot. I mean, it's been a lot of self work, right? I mean, I've, fallen on my face tons of times, personal issues, things like that. But also, like, to your point, like anybody that started early with kids and a family and they get in those positions, that corporate world, and they're miserable, it's like, how hard is it? It is difficult to walk out the door, and, I was lucky. And so I started my agency when I was 42. My wife had a really nice W-2 job, which really allowed us the flexibility to go do that. We used some savings to kind of get things going, but I sacrificed income for a long time to try and do that. And thankfully, she's supportive of me, trying stuff. And I always felt like, and that's the one thing I think my fallback was like, what, if it doesn't work, I can always go get a job somewhere. And I think in the back of my mind that helped me, I wasn't real fearful of, I wasn't walking away from some huge salary to go try something. Right.
Right.
And so I think, and And then I think too, I think, the job market's a lot different now. I mean, certainly there are opportunities to go try and find a better fit. I think the key is like not thinking of it as money or resources that you get from that job, is like truly under yourself what you want. And then can you go find a good place to work? And then are there other companies coming around that are changing the game, that are doing things differently, which is always what I hope to do, is like, well, we might build something that's totally unique or different that would attract better talent, that would have a better culture and environment in it. Because, ours was tough. And I mean, it's cutthroat business that we're in. And, there's a lot of, like you said, unhappy people, stressed people. It just, yes, going to do it on my own has had a level of stress to it, but it's mine. And, it's like, and you go back to like controlling what you can control and learning, if I try to just let go of the things I have no control over, and it doesn't do any good to worry about them. And again, I'm 50 years old and I'm still trying to figure it out, but, there certainly is, there's greater opportunity to go out and start your own business, whatever that might be. And then there's also nothing wrong with a good W-2 job.
Dude.
And if you find the right place and environment, and what I will say, like what I'm most encouraged about, what I think is really unique, like I spent a lot of time on X or whatever was Twitter. And there's kind of like this subculture of like what I call like sweaty startups or like small businesses, especially like in the contractor space. And, you can earn a really good living doing something simple just by, like you and I were talking about, just by making small changes to how things are done to improve it. I don't recommend it for everyone, but I also do think that there's a lot of, it's cool to see some of these businesses out there, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and breaking the mold of like the big businesses, right? It's like I've seen some startup law firms that left big law where they're making mid six figures.
Yeah.
And like the culture and the environment's terrible. They're working 80 hours. There's no family. There's no life. And they're like, you know what? We're walking out the door. We're going to start like this virtual law firm, and we are going to compete with the biggest places, but our quality of life is going to be better. We're going to make a great living. And that's more important to us than what we've been told is supposed to be important to us. Yeah,
that's true. And it's interesting too, because, to your point, that we're all wired differently, right? And that's what I can't. What's the name of the test? The test that I know you and I took it both together. You know what I mean?
Like culture index.
Culture index, yeah. So that's one of those things where I wish I would have had access to that earlier, and I wish I would have known how spot on it was. Because the thing of it is, like, if you're wired to go do your own thing, you need to do that. But if you're a W-2 employee, if that's what you're wired to be, there is a desperate need for that. I mean, there is a desperate need. Every one of my clients, every business owner I know, people cannot find good people. Mm-hmm. And so talk a little bit, John, because one of the things that impresses me, and this is something I haven't gotten to the point of yet, but I watched this because I grew up, my dad made the leap where he went from he worked for a company called Casters Incorporated. He's selling casters, and he got the job in like 79 or 80. And in 1983, he had the opportunity. He was going to break off and compete with that company. And I remember him getting his ducks in a row and getting ready to work out of the house and all this stuff. And this was in 1983. So I remember him doing all that stuff. But he ended up buying the company. The owners were ready to sell it and stuff like that. But one thing he could never do, he could never get that next person hired. So it was a literal mom and pop shop. Like my mom and dad worked there, and my mom would work, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And my dad was, doing sales. He was basically a middleman for casters, wheels, dollies, ladders, stuff like that. He had manufacturers he represented. He had a handful of good clients, put 2 kids through Catholic school and college, did well, never became a millionaire or anything like that. I don't think, but he, did well. He did well enough. But he can never make it to that next level and that is, to me, the scariest thing, 'cause I've never done it, but I know you've got a staff, you've got a real, when I say a real business, that's when I look at like what you've done. I look at like Ben's built. I look at things where people have got a mutual friend of ours has a company with, a contracting company with a handful of crews and, real skin in the game. And so for me, that's really impressive. Talk about finding good people and like talk about like how you do that, how you've found the right people. Cause I know you got to kiss a lot of frogs, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a wise person once told me, it's like, you winning in business is like, you got to win the people game, right? Because you're going to have to find people, and put them in the right seat to be successful. You go back to the personality profiling, and I would say like, you never have it figured out. And like, even like seeing where we are today, and it's not a huge staff, and what, the staff that I have today, it was not the staff I had 3 years ago. I mean, it's completely different than it was before. And everybody played a role kind of getting us where we are today. But things change, people change. And it's the one thing, go back to the personality profile, because I think that's really important. And well, number one, you have to understand who you are, like as a leader, like how your mind ticks, and everyone's is different. Like, so they have personality profiling. A lot of people know the book, like the 5 Languages of Love. It's very similar, right? So any sort of relationship you have, whether that's work or at home, everybody receives information differently. Everybody is motivated by different things. Some have a high tolerance for risk. Some have a very low tolerance for risk. And in your organization, you're going to have people with a whole mix of that. And so what you're really trying to identify, and this is where I think we've gotten better, is to know what role we're trying to fill, know what skills are required for that role, and then try to develop that talent. Now, I would tell you that I feel really good where we are today, and having like the right people in the right seats that complement each other real well. Like if you had a full staff of John Lovells, like we'd have a lot of great ideas, but like it'd be a mess. And so that's the beauty, like, yeah. Right. And so like for me, it's like, I'm high visionary idea. I can see and feel things that most people can't. It helps. It's kind of like my superpower. It's also a blessing and it's a curse, because I can just feel what's important to people. And then I have really good ideas. And then I've got someone on my team that's great at executing those ideas, that can really like hear what I'm saying and then put it together in a way that actually makes sense and it's repeatable and everyone can do it. And so I think, as you're building out a team, you're learning more about yourself. You're understanding, and this happens as you get to be a more mature business. Like early on, it was like, it's kind of like winging it. Like, hey, this is what I need you to do. We'll figure it out one way or another. And so then you understand who you are, like as a company, your culture, what's important to you, where you're trying to go. We call it like our true north, like, and we're all aligned on that. And then you just, you try to find people that complement your weaknesses. And that's in life, in business, and that's, in your personal life too. But so it's been a challenge, but, I've been lucky over the last, 2 years to really fill out those roles with some key people that we really complement each other well. And they like doing the things I don't like doing, and I like doing the things they don't like doing. And what you have in the corporate world a lot of times is, I think this is a job I'm supposed to go get. I go get it, but man, there's so many things that I have to do in that job that just suck the everlasting life out of me. Yeah. And so that's where you end up miserable, right? Where we might be better off like, let's take that off your plate. You focus on these things, and this person will do these things, and together, you're much stronger for it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I remember, again, in my limited corporate experience, I remember seeing people talking about the right people in the right seats. As I worked in sales, and people that would graduate from salesperson to sales manager. And
the Peter
it's
principle.
Like, those are completely different roles. Right. Completely. So you got people that are just the killer, the people that sold radio advertising are, I love people in the radio business, first of all. And it's really, Kansas City is just, and everybody's, Odyssey, one of the biggest companies, they just laid off 300 people nationwide yesterday. They let Johnny Dare got canned in Kansas City. Been on the air for 32 years. Yeah, today was his last day. Punch and Nikki lost their morning show. They've been on the air for
holy mac. Well, I guess I haven't listened to terrestrial radio in a while.
Well, it just came down. Like it all came down to. So I'm still friends with a lot of those people, but they're really good people. But I see these people, especially the sales reps. And it's a female dominated, it's these women that are just killers, dude. There's killers, but then sometimes they would get moved to a management position, and it's like, that's a totally different skill set for a totally different person. You know what I mean? Even though like logically you would think, yeah, you were a great sales rep. Let's
This,
you understand the system.
this,
It's like,
this guy or gal crushes it. So naturally they can lead a group of salespeople, and it's just not, it doesn't necessarily always the case. And, you think you want that promotion, but maybe you don't. Like, I'm better off just, kind of being in my lane and that's one of the things I've learned, one of my weaknesses, one of few, obviously. I don't
clearly,
humility being one of them, is like, I don't know how to articulate like what or how I do it to like gain like in sales, like I kind of know what my strong suit is and how I do that. Mm-hmm. But I'm not sure that system would work well for every type of salesperson that's in there. Right. And so to have me go lead the sales team or something might be challenging just because I see it differently. Right. And so to your point, and that's right. People right seat. And, just because you're good at sales doesn't mean you're going to be a good sales manager, because it's a totally different skill set. And you might get frustrated. Like, well, I don't get how you can't go sell. Like, I've been selling. Well, what did you do? Like, I don't know what I did. I just did it.
Yeah.
Now, there are some metrics and things like that with sales where it's like, if you make X amount of calls and you do some of these things, you'll meet people, you'll get in a pipeline. And then, but I've never, nothing, makes the hair on my neck stand up more than like sales tactics. Like, it's just, I've always wanted to try. I think that was part of why I wanted to go on my own, is like, I just wanted to build a better system that when we put something down in front of someone, like, it truly is like, there's nothing I have to say. It kind of, it sells itself. Right. So like, we've delivered something that's so holistically accurate and good and open and transparent that I'm not making anyone feel uncomfortable in some sort of sales pitch or sales.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, you're not. It's not the always be closing. It's not the Glengarry.
Yeah. I mean, the boiler room. I just always thought it was like, I don't like to be sold that way. Like I get uncomfortable when someone puts me in that position. And you know what? It probably works because people don't like to say no, right? But I don't ever want to make a decision because I feel pressured, or like you've made me uncomfortable in some way, or you've elicited some fear that's really not accurate. That's made me want to go a certain way. Because you will get business that way, but you will lose it real quickly.
Yeah. And I have a friend, like, especially not a friend. There's an acquaintance I know in the real estate space. And I'm like, this person is going to do so well because she has no boundaries. So she just doesn't like think maybe I shouldn't text somebody right now. So like her, like one of the things that like she's a peripheral person that I just barely know, but I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, she's perfect for that role because she's just clueless as like it would make me cringe to be like, the follow up. I hate doing that shit. Like, I feel like I want people to know I'm there. I want people to know what I do, but I don't want to be like I don't want to be shoving what I do down people's throats. I mean, it's just crazy. And
well, no, that's a good point, because I mean, that's like, selling without selling. Now I'm with you though. Like, so I think it's like, can you be visible and be present and be top of mind when someone needs your services? So you want to meet them at the right time, right? I don't want to meet them when they're thinking about it or they're not really ready to do it, but I want them to know who we are and what we do. And then like, through LinkedIn and other places where you're sharing, you're staying top of mind, where people get a chance to see who and what you are. And then when that time is right, you have a better chance of doing it. To your point, like, I'm not like that gal. That works. I wish I didn't care as much. I mean, care is probably not the right word, but like, it's like, I don't want to bother someone. Right.
Yeah.
And so you got to get rid of some of that but I also believe as you move upstream and like your business grows, like, I'm more confident in what we do. I believe so much in how we do it. Mm-hmm. I actually feel more confidence in my ability to approach someone about what we do and working with them. Yeah. And I think for salespeople, I think if you can create that platform for someone, right, then, and know that like what we're doing, like, because if you go risk your relationship capital with someone to get them to do business with you, you as the salesperson want to know that like, hey, we're going to be able to do the things that I'm promising, and we're going to do them really well. And that comes back to trusting that team behind you to execute that stuff. But it's a good skill to have, is kind of that relentless pursuit and being able to stay on top of people. I think you can do it in a way that's more tactful than
Yeah, I think so too. And that's my pitch for content to people, right? It's like put valuable content out there where you're not selling people. That way they see you, it's FaceTime. They get to know you and trust you, whether they, it's kind of it's not sneaky if you're doing it right. It's not, it's not bad, but it's also like you're not selling them, but you're just letting people know that you're out there and doing stuff. The other thing I wanted to pivot. So I know, do you guys do any work from home stuff still?
We do. We have, we have a couple staff members that work primarily remotely from home.
Yeah.
And mostly like on the service side, daily interaction stuff. We've got some pretty good controls in place. So, we can see what's going on, not like Big Brother, what's going on.
Right.
But I've gone back and forth on that. Like I'm a people person. So naturally I don't understand. And again, like you have to put yourself in someone else's shoes. I just want to be around people. And I think that there's great opportunity for collaboration. And I would say our key team members that are really, we're here every day of the week. And so that collaboration is great. And I like being around people. Honestly, I prefer everybody be in the office every day, but we provide some flexibility there. And as long as the stuff's getting done that needs to get done, we're okay with it. But it's interesting you say that because I don't know, man. Like I said, I go back and forth. Anytime something, I don't want it to be just for the sake of coming in, but at the same time, I think there's something to be said for, like I said, being in the office and being around your colleagues. And also it's not, maybe it does not, I want to say it's not as important for like a smaller organization like us, but like take my role at the city of Lee Summit. They still have a decent amount of work from home officials, right? But who doesn't get to work from home? And that's public works, that's fire, that's police.
Right.
And so I think that there is something to be said, like, why is your job more important than someone else that has to show up every day? I think you could create an environment where people want to come to work and the flexibility. Like, I feel like some office spaces have been too rigid, right? Like, I don't need someone to, like, you need to go run a personal errand. You're like, you need to pick your kid up today.
Right.
Like that stuff happens and you just have to give flexibility in the framework to be able to do that stuff. And if people felt more of that, you might actually get more people wanting to be in the office, right?
Yeah.
I try to steal anytime something comes up like that, because it can get real contentious, but like, where people dig into their corners, I always try to steel man the other side of it. Like I always try to see if I was on the other side of it, why I might want that. But I also think, I don't know that you can say unequivocally without a doubt you can be more productive at home than you are at the office. There's certainly plenty of time wasted at the office where I do it.
Dude,
pop over to the coffee shop, coffee sit there and doom scroll X or something like that for a little bit. But
it's interesting because when I was in sales, now of course I was in sales and all the people, I liked all the people I worked with, but we're all salespeople and we're all like, dude, you and I could sit and talk for like literally for hours, but that's what it was with all these people. I liked everybody I worked with. So you get in there, we had to be there at like 8:30. And a lot of times I wouldn't get anything done till 10:15, 10:30 because your kid had a game last night. Oh my God, tell me about it. Like, you're shooting. So it's, I get both sides of it. And I'm a contractor, fractional, whatever you want to call it. And so for me, I work better like this because I have no distractions. It's like, but I'm social enough to where, and it's, I've kind of got the best of both worlds because I don't have any clients I don't like. So when I go see people, like I get my social cup is full enough. You know what I mean? Yeah. I get to go out and I shoot video, I have meetings, I do stuff, I talk to people. But it's really interesting because you got did you hear the Jamie Dimon clip that went viral?
Oh yeah.
Like the leaked Zoom of him just lighting up his staff. It's interesting to me because I had one piece of content. So I started doing this. I took a year off of this podcast, not like I'm trying to be Yellowstone or anything, but we had the kid and, I put this thing on the shelf, but so I did 10 or 11 episodes last year, right? Before we had Blake. And I had one episode where I was talking about working from home, and I'm neither for it or against it, because I see both sides of it. Like I totally get both sides of it. I think a hybrid option is probably, makes sense for a lot of people in some sense. But I saw this post from Nick Huber on LinkedIn yesterday, and it went back, and Nick, I don't know Nick Huber, but he's the sweaty startup guy. He's got a big following,
I actually know Nick personally. That's for another day, but
yeah. And so I'm going to read his post, because I pulled it up right here, and it's got pictures of a park in Austin, Texas, where everybody's like laying out in the middle of the day.
It's
yeah.
great.
These pictures were taken in Austin, Texas during business hours last year. If this is your work from home schedule, I have terrible news. There are people in the Philippines and Latin America who can do your job better than you for $5 an hour and work 60 hours a week, no complaints. With AI, their English is better than yours. It is the worst case scenario for you and your $200,000 liberal arts degree. American companies are learning they can get 3 times the productivity for 20% of the cost. 80% of my workforce is in Latin America, South Africa, and the Philippines. It's a business cheat code, and it's about to change everything for remote workers. If you aren't making decisions, leading people, selling something, or generally adding a ton of value to your company, these people are coming for you and your job. Now,
a little bit of engagement bait there.
A little bit of engagement bait.
Yeah,
now,
it's pretty hard.
I had put out, so when I'll chop this podcast up too, but the way I always do it is I'll put out the long form podcast, and I'll cut it up, and I'll put out from an hour long podcast, there will be 15, 30-second clips. And one of the clips that I said, and of course, I just said, look, if you can do your job from anywhere, anybody can do your job from anywhere. And you need to be aware of that. Like I'm not, and I said, there are people, because I've hired them from the Philippines, and it's a magnificent culture. I mean, their English speaking is good. And with the internet now, a lot of I'm not saying you have to do things that way, but anyway, I made this point, and I don't know how, but I put this clip. Oh, I got lit up. I think it got, I don't know.
You got lit up. That's great,
dude. Well, so here's the problem. And I wish in hindsight, I was a giant pussy and I pulled it down, because I think it got shared. It must have gotten shared to Reddit. It must have gone somewhere like,
oh my gosh,
like what's that? What's the Reddit, the board? It's like, anti-work. Did you ever read the anti-work?
No, I try to stay off Reddit, but
it is it's a cesspool of just the best people that you can imagine. And so, I mean, these people and again, I know the game. So the fact that I didn't keep, because it was getting thousands of views, and I just panicked and yanked it down, because I'm like, oh shit, I get in my head or whatever. But I said basically the same thing that Nick said, and I find it very interesting, because again, if you're doing something that is super,
I think your point was super simple and just dead on. If you can do your job from home, someone else can.
Yeah. And and that doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to India or Pakistan or the Philippines. You could go to rural Iowa, where the cost of living is a fraction of what it is even in Kansas City, but especially in New York, Chicago, a big city, and I look at this stuff, and it is such a lightning rod issue. And again, I don't have a dog in the fight, but I'm interested to hear people's takes on it, because I see both sides of it. I get the culture side of it, but I also, the meme is like, this is the culture, and it's like a picture of a cubicle farm. You know what I mean? So there's it's like, I totally get both sides of it. And again, it's like, well, for me, if I hire somebody, everything that I hire out at this point is strictly task based. It's the same thing people hire me out for. You know what I mean? Like, they hire me to create video content. It's like, they don't care if I'm doing it on a Sunday morning, or nobody gives a shit. Right. If I'm producing a podcast for you and you want your podcast, your shorts, you get everything done, as long as it's done by the time it's supposed to be there, they don't care if it takes 12 hours or 2 hours. They don't care about anything except for the fact that they're getting the product.
And so getting a quality product.
Correct. Right, yeah. I mean, the quality's got to be there, but and so it's very interesting to me to see people just, and of course they just come for your throats. Oh, you're a fascist. You're, just every stick. And I'm just like, oh my God, you're a slum lord. It's called a slum lord, all this shit. And I'm like, bro, I don't even like. I'm just a guy in his basement.
I'm just down in my basement.
Just
this podcast. I got a 6-month-old baby, and you guys are just killing me over it.
Yeah, you guys are like, well, you guys are ready to.
So if you just take that post, there's multiple lightning rod pieces to that, right? So if someone wanted to have a debate or a discussion about, the use of foreign labor, that's a separate argument, right? And I can see both sides of it, right? So most people will say, well, you're paying them a slave's wage and this is ridiculous. And, you feel good about paying. Well, the truth of the matter is, if you really wanted to get into it, our dollar spends a lot more over there, right? So now you're going to get, if you really want to know, then let's have a talk about inflation in the U.S. I don't think we have time for that today, right? But, and then you have, the type of workmanship and then maybe you do have a culture and environment that that's a really good paying job in the city that they live in. I can't remember what I read the cost of living was in Colombia. It was ridiculous how low it was. If you made $50,000 a year in Colombia, it was equivalent of making $250,000 a year.
Right.
Now, don't fact check me on that because I'm probably off. But the point is, the cost of living there is so low, and we've grown accustomed to those wages that we've had to keep up with in the U.S. for inflation. So now here's an alternative, right? So I don't want to get into that argument because I could see both sides of it. The other thing I would say is that, especially if you go back to Jamie Dimon's post, right? And let's take massive, huge corporations, because I think you have to separate that from a small business like me here. Many of these companies that are publicly traded have grown, and they grow for the sake of growing. I've always heard this adage is a business will grow to its revenues. It doesn't mean it should, but a business or a city government or a budget will grow to its revenues. And then you have to ask yourself, and who's that benefiting? And if it's a publicly traded company, well, it's the shareholders, right? And so as long as the stock's going up and everything's good and everything's fine, then, stay the course. But if you want to come in and be a true disruptor, it's well, actually, we don't even need this amount of staff. We could do it for far less and be more efficient. That's where businesses start to look at their bottom line and they say, well, this is ridiculous. We've got it, what started out as maybe a little bit has swung way far to the other side. And maybe it's time for businesses, especially some of these bigger ones, to take a look at who's this really benefiting, right? And as a shareholder, shouldn't we demand more from the companies that we invest in publicly, right? Shouldn't we want them to be as efficient and as lean as possible while still being profitable and delivering quality services? So I think, it's, and that's a cutthroat, Jamie Dimon is, it's a cutthroat. It's a big, big business. And so I think that there's a lot of different points of view in that, but I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that, right?
I don't think.
Yeah. I mean, you can take, and here's another hot button. We talk about Elon and him buying Twitter, right?
Yeah.
So let's just take the political part of it, but let's take the business sense out of it. And so as a publicly traded company, stock had basically just kind of remained flat for however many years. And it kind of, I think you could see this in a lot of publicly traded companies, but they've got their baked in ad revenue and some other things, and they're living a really nice life and everybody's making a great salary. And then someone has to buy it for a huge dollar amount, right? And they've got to figure out a way to pay that back. So the first thing they're going to do is come in and take a look at the organization and say, what cuts can we make to improve the profitability and justify this? And so then you find out is well, gosh, we were able to do the same amount of work with a third of the staff and a third of the payroll. And by the way, that's better for the shareholders. And by the way, that's better for our business long term. There's a lot that goes into it. You certainly put that out in the universe, everybody will have an opinion on it.
Yeah.
And rake you over the coals.
Yeah. I mean, when you hear about it, there were a lot of people that were, living in San Francisco and LA, living in these high rent places. And when they went remote, a lot of people moved to Mexico City because it's a ton of people. You can speak English down there. It costs nothing to live down there. And the people down in Mexico City, they hated all the Americans coming down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's because you're swarming us. We don't want you. So it is wild.
And people taking extra jobs and, yeah.
And the funny thing about a guy like Jamie Dimon is too, because he's one of those guys that he's got a pretty good public image, but it's so easy to forget that a guy like Jamie Dimon is a killer. Like you don't see it when he's on CNBC and when he's doing his public appearances and his TED Talks and he's so buttoned up. And this goes across the board. You know, you get to people, it's almost like, you know, you and I both played high school sports, but you meet those like people that played D1 college sports are just cut from a different cloth. And it's the same thing. And you go to the pros, these people are like, it's a level of intensity. It's a level of competitiveness. Well,
it's a true meritocracy. I mean, it really is. And yes, there's some, physical attributes, some God-given gifts that give you that opportunity. But then it's like, to go to the next level, what are you willing to sacrifice or do to reach the next level, right? And in sports, you can't really fake it.
No, you can't. I mean, even with all the God-given talent, you've still got to put the work in when you get to that level. But it's just funny when you see Jamie Dimon, because I don't want to say he's like, he doesn't appear to be soft, you know what I mean? But he doesn't appear to be like a true killer. And then you hear that leaked audio, you're like, this is how Jamie Dimon became Jamie Dimon.
Leaked audio.
Yeah, the leaked audio, right? It's one of those things. But yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting. I think people feel like there's more license to actually say some things that they've been wanting to say. Right.
Yeah.
And like, hey guys, like we need to zap this back, and like, it's okay. We don't have to walk on eggshells anymore. Like, let's have real conversations about the value you're creating for the organization. And if it still matches up, then let's keep going. If it doesn't, then, maybe it's time for a change.
Yeah. We were due for a course correction, and that's what's going on. So, well, hey, we're coming up on about an hour almost. So I think this is a pretty good spot to wrap it up. Do you have anything you want to say to the 12 people that are listening?
No, I don't. I don't have any. I think we tiptoed on some really contentious, maybe some topics, but I've enjoyed the conversation. It's always fun to catch up, and you and I are never short on ideas, thoughts, or words. So
True.
It's fun to dive into some fun topics of discussion.
Yeah, buddy. Thank you very much. We'll do it again.